It was a Tuesday when Ellie Harper did a day, so ordinary it felt like a betrayal. The sun hung low, spilling golden light over the lawns of Willow Creek, a suburban enclave where every house wore the same shade of beige, and every mailbox stood at precisely the HOA-approved height. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and the faint tang of chlorine from backyard pools. Ellie, just 16, had loved days like this. She'd sit under the sprawling magnolia in her family's yard, sketching birds in her spiral notebook or reading dog-eared paperbacks she'd borrowed from the library. Acute myeloid leukemia had stolen her inch by inch. Over 2 years. Her V.Y. Brandt sketches reduced to shaky lines, her laughter fading into a whisper until she slipped away in a hospital room, her father Daniel's hand clutching hers, her mother Sarah's tears soaking the sheets, and her older brother Caleb staring blankly at the wall, as if he could will the world to rewind. The Harpers returned to their home on Maple Lane that evening, a house that now felt like a hollow shell without Ellie's voice echoing through it. They decided against a formal funeral, no stiff suits, no overpriced wreaths. Instead, they planned a gathering in their backyard 2 days later, a quiet memorial for the girl who'd once conned VY and said the neighbors to name a stray cat Sir Paws. Friends and family trickled in, bringing handwritten notes, Polaroids of Ellie's gap-toothed grin, and a tray of her favorite oatmeal raisin cookies. Caleb set up a small table under the magnolia, placing Ellie's sketchbook beside a framed photo of her laughing at the beach, her dark curls wild in the wind. A portable speaker hummed with her playlist Fleetwood Mac, Phoebe Bridgers, Simon Va Garfunkel soft enough to cradle the silence rather than break it. For a moment, it worked. The Harpers stood together, fragile but holding, surrounded by people who loved Ellie enough to show up without pretense. Sarah adjusted the photo frame, her fingers lingering on the glass. Daniel murmured thanks to a neighbor who'd brought a candle etched with Ellie's initials. Caleb, still hollow-eyed from sleepless nights, knelt by the table, tying Ellie's friendship bracelet around a small vase of daisies she'd once called nature's confetti. The stillness was sacred until it wasn't. Marlene Voss arrived like a storm front rolling over a clear sky. She was the HOA president of Willow Creek, a woman who wielded bylaws like a scepter and carried herself with the unyielding posture of someone who'd never lost an argument. Her ash-blonde hair was pulled into a tight bun, her navy blazer crisp despite the late August heat. She clutched a tablet, her manicured nails tapping the screen as she strode across the cul-de-sac, her loafers clicking against the pavement with metronomic precision. Daniel spotted her first, his brow furrowing as she approached the edge of their yard. "You're exceeding the allowable number of guests for an unpermitted gathering," Marlene announced, her voice sharp and clinical, as if she were reading a weather report. She didn't glance at the memorial table, didn't acknowledge the mourners clutching tissues or the faint strains of landslide drifting through the air. In these vehicles, she gestured toward the cars lining the street, VY Olate Parking Ordinance 12B. "I'll need this dispersed within the hour, or I'll escalate it to the board." Daniel blinked, his mind struggling to process the words. He stepped forward, hands open, voice low but trembling. "Marlene, this is for Ellie. She passed away Thursday. We're just saying goodbye." He waited, expecting a softening, a retreat, anything human. But Marlene's lips thinned, her gaze flicking briefly to him before returning to her tablet. "Rules don't bend for personal circumstances," she said. "You should have submitted a variance request." With that, she turned on her heel and marched back to her pristine colonial across the street, Leah VYing behind the faint scent of lavender perfume in a stunned silence. Sarah's hand tightened on Daniel's arm, her breath hitching. Caleb stood slowly, his fists clenching as he stared after Marlene, the bracelet still dangling from his fingers. No one spoke. The weight of her intrusion settled over the gathering like ash, choking the fragile peace they'd carved out. A neighbor whispered, "She's always been like this," but it didn't dull the sting. 20 minutes later, the police arrived. 2 patrol cars rolled up silently, their lights flashing red and blue against the dusk, turning the white picket fences into a kaleidoscope of accusation. Daniel stepped onto the lawn, confusion knotting his chest. No one had called 911, not from their house, not from this quiet assembly of grief. The officers moved with mechanical efficiency. One surveyed the street. The other rested a hand near his holster, eyes scanning the yard. "We got a report of a disruptive gathering," the taller officer said, his tone flat, rehearsed. "Potential trespassing, intoxicated VUI, or..." He didn't meet Daniel's gaze, just kept his focus on the clipboard in his hand. Daniel opened his mouth to protest, but the words died as he saw Caleb. His son was still by the memorial table, head bowed, fingers tracing the edge of Ellie's sketchbook. He hadn't noticed the police yet, lost in a private goodbye until the second officer barked, "You, step away from there." Caleb jolted, his head snapping up, eyes wide and red-rimmed. "What?" "To live here," he stammered, hands rising instinctively. He was 20, lanky, with a mop of dark hair and a black hoodie that hung loose on his frame. His voice cracked, not from defiance, but exhaustion, a boy dragged from mourning into absurdity. The officer didn't hesitate. There was a sharp click, a flash of motion, and then Caleb was on the ground, his body convulsing as the taser's prongs sank into his chest. Sarah's scream tore through the evening, raw and guttural, as she stumbled toward him. Daniel lunged, shouting, "He's my son. Stofie lives here." But the second officer blocked him, a wall of muscle and protocol, muttering something about non-compliance. The memorial table tipped in the chaos, Ellie's photo crashing onto the grass, the glass cracking like a gunshot. Guests scattered, some frozen in shock, others pulling out phones to record. The speaker cut off mid-song, Leah VYing only the hum of police radios and Caleb's choked gasps as the voltage faded. Sarah dropped to her knees beside him, sobbing, "He's not a thread's my baby," while Daniel fought to reach them, his pleas swallowed by the officer's bark commands. Across the street, Marlene stood on her porch, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She didn't flinch, didn't blink, just watched, as if she'd orchestrated a play and was critiquing the performance. Later, the call logs would confirm it. The complaint had come from her address, time-stamped 10 minutes after she'd left the Harper's yard. Suspicious male, possibly armed, she'd told the dispatcher, her voice calm and deliberate. Caleb had been holding nothing but his sister's sketchbook. The ambulance arrived silently, its lights slicing through the night. Caleb didn't speak as they loaded him onto the stretcher, his eyes distant, his hands trembling against the restraints. Sarah climbed in beside him, her face streaked with tears, while Daniel followed in their car, the rear VYEW mirror reflecting the fading glow of the memorial they'd abandoned. The ER was a blur of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells, a cold contrast to the warmth Ellie had once brought to their lives. Caleb sat on the exam table, staring at the floor as a nurse checked his VY towels. "Physically, he'll be fine," she said, her voice clipped but not unkind. "But this kind of shock, it lingers." Daniel recognized the subtext. They were on their own to piece their son back together. They brought Caleb home at sunrise, the sky a mocking pink against the grayness of their reality. He shuffled upstairs to Ellie's room, shutting the door behind him without a word. For 2 days, he didn't emerge. Sarah left trays of food, outside soup, toast, anything he might eat, but they went untouched. At night, Daniel heard him cry out once, a sharp, panic sound that yanked him from sleep. He found Caleb bolt upright, drenched in sweat, whispering, "I felt it again, electricity." Daniel sank to the floor beside the bed, silent, because what could he say? How do you meet a son who'd been attacked at his sister's memorial, in his own yard, by the people sworn to protect him? Sarah unraveled in quieter ways. She stopped sleeping, her hands unsteady as she poured coffee she didn't drink. Daniel found her one morning in the bathroom, sitting on the tile, staring at nothing. "I can't lose him too," she whispered, and the words carved a hollow in his chest. Then the letter arrived. It was Thursday, 4 days after Ellie's death, 2 days after the tossing. Daniel retrieved the mail, expecting condolence cards or bills. Instead, he found a crisp envelope with a Willow Creek HOA logo stamped in the corner. Inside was a typed notice signed by Marlene Voss. Notice of violation Category 3. Unauthorized gathering exceeding noise and occupancy limits. Unapproved lawn decorations, candles, photographs, miscellaneous items. Future violations may result in fines or legal action. Daniel read it 3 times, each word a nail in the coffin of his restraint. His daughter's ashes sat in an urn on the mantel. His son hadn't spoken in days, and Marlene Voss was complaining about candles. He didn't shout, didn't curse. He walked to the backyard, past the magnolia where Ellie's cracked photo still lay, and lit a match. The notice curled into ash in the fire pit, the smoke rising like a promise. As he watched it burn, something shifted, not a roar, but a quiet, unshakable resolve. This wasn't just about grief anymore. It was about a machine that crushed families under the guise of order, and the woman who ran it. Daniel Harper didn't explode into action like a movie hero. His rebellion was methodical, born from the same meticulousness that had made him a mid-level accountant for 20 years. He started at the kitchen table, laptop open, a legal pad beside him, the same table where Ellie had once quizzed Caleb on algebra, where Sarah had braided her daughter's hair before school. He requested HOA records under the transparency clause Marlene had touted at every meeting, expecting resistance. To his surprise, they complied, emailing him PDFs of bylaws, minutes, and financials. That was her first mistake. He dug in. The violations came first, 47 citations in 8 months, all targeting homes with kids, elderly residents, or renters. One family got fined for a basketball hoop 2 inches too high. Another for a porch swing deemed solely disruptive. Then he found the cameras. Marlene's security system 3 ring de cessant aimed at her own property. One pointed at the Harper's driveway, another at the elderly Miller's front yard, a third at the cul-de-sac where kids rode bikes. No signs, no consent forms illegal under state law and HOA policy. He kept going. A parking ordinance passed 6 months ago had 12 signatures, for a forged, confirmed by neighbors he called late into the night. Then the money. $22,000 paid to Greenhaven Landscaping, a company owned by Marlene's nephew, Tyler Voss, a 20-something with no landscaping experience and a pickup truck still sporting dealer plates. Daniel cross-checked county records. Greenhaven didn't exist beyond a P.O. box. He didn't stop at paper trails. He knocked on doors, starting with the Millers Stan and Ruth, who'd lived in Willow Creek since the 90s. Over tea, Ruth admitted Marlene had fined them for excessive holiday lights 2 Christmases ago, threatening liens if they didn't comply. Next was Lena Ortiz, a single mom on Birch Street, who showed him 7 violation notices in 4 months, one for her son's tricycle left on the lawn overnight. She told me she'd report me to CPS if I fought back, Lena whispered, her voice shaking. The fire spread. Neighbors who'd stayed silent began to speak, their stories piling up like kindling. Daniel took notes, recorded calls, built a case. He met with a CIVYL rights lawyer, Amanda Pierce, in a cramped office downtown. She leaned forward when he played the taser footage, grainy but damning, captured by Lena's phone. "This isn't just harassment," Amanda said, eyes narrowing. "It's systemic abuse." She looped in a colleague, a bulldog named Greg Torres, who'd toppled corrupt HOAs before. Daniel didn't stop there. He slipped a folder to a local reporter, Mia Chun, at the Willow Creek Gazette, asking her to dig into Marlene's real estate ties. He kept moving, fueled not by rage, but by clarity. This wasn't just about his family anymore. It was about every family Marlene had crushed. Marlene sensed a shift. 2 weeks later, she called an emergency HOA meeting at the community center, a beige box with flickering fluorescents and a lingering smell of bleach. 50 residents filled the folding chairs, tension crackling in the air. Marlene stood at the podium, flanked by 2 board members, nervous yes-men in polo shirts, her smile tight as she launched into her defense. "I've heard the rumors," she said, voice smooth as polished stone. This is about maintaining standards, not settling scores. Facts over feelings. Daniel waited in the back, a thick binder in hand. When Marlene paused, he stepped forward, plugging his laptop into the projector. "I've got some facts," he said, his tone even but unyielding. The room hushed as the first slide appeared. A spreadsheet of violations, color-coded by demographic kids, seniors, minorities. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Next, photos of Marlene's cameras, timestamps showing months of surveillance. Then the forged petition, followed by Greenhaven's financials due law 22,000 funneled to her nephew. The final blow was the 911 call. Daniel hit play, and Marlene's voice filled the room. "Yes, I'm reporting a disturbance at 118 Maple Lane. Loud gathering, possible weapons. A male acting erratic early 20s, dark clothing." The lie hung there exposed. Caleb wasn't armed. Wasn't erratic, just a VYing brother in a hoodie. Daniel didn't look at Marlene as he shut the laptop. "That's my son," he said simply, then walked out, Leah VYing the room to erupt. Marlene was ousted that night, the vote unanimous. She gathered her papers in silence, her face a mask of stone, and left without a word. But the reckoning didn't end there. The Harpers sued. Daniel and Sarah filed for emotional distress and defamation. Caleb sued the officer who'd tossed him and the HOA for the false report. The police launched an internal review. Officers were disciplined. One resigned. Mia Chin's article dropped a week later, exposing Marlene's undisclosed real estate license and her role in pushing sales for HOA-favored developers. The state board revoked her license within days. Marlene's house became a ghost of itself. The lawn grew wild. The shutters faded. Violation notices ironic twins of her own piled up on her door. She vanished from Willow Creek. Rumors swirling she'd moved to a condo downtown. The machine she'd built turned on her, and the symmetry wasn't lost on Daniel as he passed her empty home one morning, a quiet satisfaction settling in his chest. Caleb's recovery was slow, a fragile thread pulled taut. He started Leah VYing Ellie's room, joining Daniel on walks, his steps tentative but present. In therapy, he wrote a jagged poem about grief and voltage, ending with, "You can't unbreak the Lee VYing, but you can keep them from fading." Sarah turned Ellie's room into a community space. Ellie's nook, filled with her books and art, open to kids who needed a quiet escape. Laughter returned to the house, soft at first, then steady. In court, Marlene sat mute as the judge delivered the verdict. Restitution, legal fees, a permanent ban from HOA leadership. "You turned authority into a weapon," the judge said, her voice cutting. "You forgot what a home is for." Daniel didn't cheer. Justice wasn't loud, it was complete. A year later, a new family moved into Marlene's old house, a couple with 3 kids and a golden retriever that bounded across the lawn. Sarah brought them cookies, Caleb helped with boxes, and the cul-de-sac echoed with life again. Daniel stood by the magnolia, Ellie's photo still there, her smile catching the light. The pain hadn't left, but it had softened, woven into something enduring. Willow Creek wasn't perfect, but it was free. And for the Harpers, that was enough. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.